Hi everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Well, is Harley Davidson's glass half empty or half full? They just released their 2023 second quarter earnings. You know, I don't think today I'm going to get into all the nitty-gritty of the financials because it's kind of more of the same, but clear trends have emerged, and just as I suggested in a video a few weeks ago, I think the second quarter earnings report was going to really lay out the roadmap for what Harley Davidson's going to be doing here in the next few years, and I'll show you why I think that's the case. So I'll cover some of the highlights, lowlights as it were, for the financials, but also I just really want to focus on the strategic implications of what's going on with them at this point. As a summary on the financials, they made less money than Wall Street was expecting, but not that much less. Harley helped themselves out in that regard by spending millions of dollars rebuying their stock. So the drop in earnings per share would have been greater had they not done the stock buyback. Harley has a narrative out right now that Wall Street seems to be buying into, and that is there's a lot of excitement that was at the 120th anniversary celebration in Milwaukee in mid-July. There's some excitement about the new CVO models and the technology that's showing up on those bikes, the partial liquid-cooled engines, the wide or massive, really, the largest infotainment system in the motorcycle industry at well over 12 inches, and some stylistic changes, lots of bells and whistles on the positive side for Harley. Harley continues to make money because essentially it's what I call squeezing the blood out of the turnip strategy or the harvest strategy. They're making most of their money off large touring bikes and trikes and the CVO models. Harley Davidson's separate LiveWire subsidiary continues to hemorrhage cash. No surprise there, but what is surprising is the decline in sales, and I'll get more into that here in a bit, but the LiveWire 1 is essentially the sales figures are a complete joke. Now let's go back to the high profit margin per motorcycle. I think this is one of the more interesting graphics, and what you'll see is they're back to $3,700 profit per motorcycle sold, which is where they were in 2014. But keep in mind, in 2014, they had a much broader mix of motorcycle models. They still had the street motorcycles, they still had Sportsters, which they've discontinued now, and they had the Dyna models, and those have been discontinued. So Harley Davidson in 2014 managed to make the same level of profit per motorcycle on average as they did in 2014, but now they're essentially skimming the cream of the crop when it comes to the models and the pricing of the models. That's really their almost exclusive focus right now. Then on Harley Davidson Financial, they continue to lose money. Their loan losses are trending up yet again. They plan to double down on their repossession efforts. Apparently they're using artificial intelligence to intervene or to help human agents intervene with people who are late on their payments. So I guess they're using AI to have these agents talk more professionally and more effectively with people who are behind on their payments. That seemed rather odd that you would have to have an AI involved with that, but there you go. Harley's other big issue is their ballooning inventory. It goes up quarter by quarter, and that seems to be because of the issues with the overall economy. The high interest rates, which were just raised again by the Fed here last week, and also high inflation that's still persisting, is conspiring to make discretionary purchases more difficult and more out of reach for people. The other thing is the consensus on Harley Davidson stock in terms of overall sentiment has trended downward from a buy to a hold. I think the analysts are becoming increasingly skeptical about what Harley Davidson's saying versus what they're doing. There were a number of analysts on the call here that asked pointed questions about Harley's growing inventory. Do they have their inventory right-sized? How do they see sales for the rest of third quarter? Keep in mind, we're a month into third quarter, and Harley CEO Jochen Zeitz refused to answer any of those questions, said we'll just have to let it play out, which essentially for the rest of the year, Harley's forecasting flat to modest sales growth, so 0 to say 3% sales growth. So he's narrowed the band quite a bit in terms of what they expect to do for the rest of the year. As I mentioned, CVO sales are strong. That's a bright spot for them. On the earnings call, they indicated that 70% of the CVOs were already pre-sold before they showed up at dealerships. I'm curious if any of you out there are interested in buying the new CVO, or if you know somebody who is. I mean, obviously it's a limited production model, but it's a very high price. I think most of these CVOs are going for in excess of $50,000. So going back to the trends, I think the CVO technology will undoubtedly trickle down to other conventional street glide, road glide models. At some point, I mean, you've got several factors there, but we've seen this before where things used to be CVO exclusive, after a couple of years show up in the other models. The reason why Harley will have these features trickle down to other models is because they'll want to continue to have support for higher priced motorcycles. Hard to charge more and more for your street glide and road glides unless you're offering at least incrementally some new feature or some new styling change that's going to help the pain of those high prices take the sting out of it a little bit, I suppose. So another trend that's clear to me, I did a video on this recently when Harley released their Indian-made 440X model, and previous to that, when they announced their 300 and 500cc Chinese-made motorcycles. The Chinese and Indian-made motorcycles will be badged as Harleys, but they won't be offered for sale in the United States. Instead, you'll see some of these Chinese bikes show up at rider academies at Harley Davidson dealerships. But with Harley's near obsessive focus on high margins, I'm convinced those bikes will never be sold in North America. Essentially, they would be going back to more of a product mix that they had in 2014 when they had the street models, they had the Sportsters, and they had the Dynas. And obviously Harley has methodically culled those type of bikes from their product line here in North America. So I don't think they're going back to that anytime soon. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but Harley Davidson has their fuel dealer build-out initiative. Apparently there's one dealership in North America that's been built out to these new specs. I don't know much about it. I've been researching it, and so far all I've really gathered is it's a pretty high dollar upgrade to a dealership. This isn't too unlike what Harley Davidson did in the late 90s, early 2000s when they pushed their dealers to expand into these 50,000 square foot mega dealerships with high overhead. A lot of these dealerships are open 7 days a week. They have a large staff on hand, so they have huge overheads. Harley seems to be favoring these types of dealerships, particularly ones that are owned by as a chain of dealerships by a particular group, usually an automotive or investment banking group. Harley continues to put the squeeze on the mom and pops. Harley indicated that their build out in North America for this fuel initiative will be completed in 10 years. So be interested to see if they'll exempt the mom and pops, if the mom and pops don't want to spend that kind of money, which I don't think most of them have that kind of money if it's an expensive build out, but we'll see. I'm in Minnesota, and there's a small mom and pop Harley dealership near me, and they're awesome. But I noticed they don't have a Livewire charger. They're not a massive footprint dealership. So if those kind of dealers are faced with a build out that they either can't afford or simply just can't implement because of the configuration of their building, those guys are going to be run out. So let's go back to the continued losses at Livewire. So far for the first and second quarter of the year, they've lost $57 million. Now keep in mind, the Del Mar model's finally rolling off the assembly line in York, so it hasn't been offered for sale yet. So all the Livewire models for the full-size motorcycles have been Livewire 1s, which came out in 2019. First under the Harley badge, and then shortly thereafter rebranded or rebadged as Livewire 1 models. Now Harley, as I've mentioned before, still owns 90% of Livewire, so it's just Harley by a different name. So they lost $57 million for the first half of this year to sell 96 Livewire 1 motorcycles. Now, of course, Livewire includes electric scooters and e-bicycles, but their main purpose is to sell electric motorcycles. So why would somebody continue down the path of this massive investment to continue to lose money? In fact, the rate that they're losing money is going up, and the sales is going down. Livewire is selling fewer and fewer Live 1 models. So apparently Harley's counting on the lower priced Del Mar model and also the opportunity to sell Del Mars in Europe, which they just started this year. Somehow that's going to save them, that they expect to sell in excess of 500 Del Mar models by the end of the year, which would be more electric motorcycles than they've sold in the last couple of years, perhaps even the last 3 years. So, you know, I have to say both the Livewire 1, which I've test ridden, and what I've seen on the Del Mar, they're premium electric motorcycles. They're quite nice. But in essence, what Harley has demonstrated is that demand for their flagship electric motorcycle is pretty much dead. I mean, the people who are interested in buying an electric motorcycle are a small part of the segment. So you take that segment and say, okay, who among you want to buy a luxury version of an electric motorcycle? Obviously, that's an even smaller group. So what Harley seems to be saying is, hey, by introducing a model that sells for $15,500 instead of over $22,000, we'll have a lot more sales. Well, that's great, except for the fact that the level of premium features or just the overall fit and finish of these electric motorcycles, they're on a continuum relative to their competitors. So Zero motorcycles, technically they have a greater range. They have some other features that the Livewires don't have, but they don't look as good. The fit and finish isn't as good as essentially as the Livewire models. So, but again, there's not many people lining up to buy these premium electric bikes. You know, Harley Davidson, they own Buell from the late 90s to 2009. And during that time period, Harley sold over 130,000 Buell motorcycles. So roughly 9,000 Buell motorcycles a year. And yet they saw fit to kill off Buell motorcycles in order to, quote, focus on the Harley Davidson models. If they're only selling 100, 200 Livewire models each year, how long is it going to be before they just say, hey, this isn't working? They got in too big and too early on the electric motorcycle front. I mean, even the owners of Old Yeller knew what to do.
No, Mama. There's no hope for him now, Travis.
Now, oddly enough, Eric Buell is back involved with another venture, and guess what? He's selling electric motorcycles. These just rolled out. They're offered for sale now, and they're at a $10,500 price point. So they have a slightly greater range, perhaps, than the Livewire Del Mar model. This fuel electric motorcycle reportedly has a range of 150 miles. They are wisely marketing this bike as a commuter motorcycle, because once you have sustained speeds over 50 miles an hour, you lose the ability for the regenerative capacity, and it just rapidly drains the battery. So in essence, if they couldn't sell Live 1 models because they were too premium and too expensive, now they're pinning their hopes on selling a cheaper Del Mar model. What's going to happen when somebody like Eric Buell comes along and sells a bike that is rather premium, not as premium perhaps as the Del Mar, but significantly cheaper, essentially two-thirds of the price of the Harley Del Mar? I think it'd be ironic and quite possible if Buell sells more electric motorcycles than Harley and their Livewire subsidiary ever will. So my question for you is, how long can this go on? Do you think that this is still a smart investment, that Harley's planning for the future? You know, Jochen Zeitz recently, for the first time, acknowledged that there's going to be a need to continue with internal combustion engines, but perhaps with e-fuels as a bridge to full adoptance of electric vehicles and electric motorcycles. But he also said that they just don't have the money to invest in all these other technologies. So they're choosing to invest and lose money in their electric play, and they continue to spend money on buying their stock back. There's no safety net for these guys, really. And especially if they decide to stubbornly hold on to the Livewire operation, it's just going to drag them down, in my opinion. Harley has continued to double down on selling more and more expensive bikes to fewer and fewer people. And that is a viable business model, but it may not be that sustainable. So, I mean, how big a market is there for people continuing to buy $30,000 plus touring motorcycle? I mean, there's still a market out there. There's people who are retiring, people who later in life have a lot more money. The situation, though, is that the number of people moving into the 50 to 65-year-old age bracket, that the sheer number goes down year by year compared to previous years as the baby boomer generation ages out. So if you like this kind of content, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. And please stay tuned for future videos. Thanks very much.